My child, do you remember the last time your heart felt light? Not just okay, not just managing, light. There was a time, and you may have to reach far back to find it, when something inside your chest was not heavy. A time when laughter did not have to push past a weight to reach the surface. A time when a quiet moment was simply quiet, not a space where old pain rushed in to fill the silence. That lightness was not an accident. It was not naive happiness that existed only because you had not yet learned how hard life could be. That lightness existed because something inside you had not yet been wounded in the way it has been wounded since. Something was still whole that has since been broken. Something was still open that has since learned to close. I am not telling you this to make you grieve for what you have lost. I am telling you this because I want to take you back to that lightness. Not by erasing what happened. Not by pretending the years between then and now did not leave their marks. But by healing what those years left behind. Every heavy thing your heart carries right now. Every flinch when a memory surfaces. Every wall you built to keep yourself safe from being hurt again. Every quiet ache that lives underneath your daily functioning. Like a low hum you have grown so accustomed to that you almost forgot it was there. All of it is the residue of wounds that were never fully healed. And I have come to heal them. Not with a formula, not with a program, not with instructions for how to manage the pain more efficiently. With something far older and far more tender than any of those things. With my love reaching into the specific place where the wound still lives, the place that still catches you off guard when a word lands wrong or a quiet moment becomes too quiet. You have been carrying something that was never meant to be carried alone. And the fact that you have carried it with the measure of dignity you have, the fact that you have continued to function, to show up for the people and the responsibilities that needed you, the fact that you have managed to keep going even when the interior weight was heavy enough to stop a less resilient person in their tracks, that endurance deserves acknowledgement before anything else is said. You have done something remarkable simply by continuing. And the continuation has not gone unnoticed by me. But continuing is not the same as healing. And my hope for you is not merely that you would continue indefinitely under the weight of what you carry. My hope is that you would lay it down. Not all at once, because that is not how this works. But piece by piece, layer by layer, in the slow and trustworthy way that deep healing happens when love is present and patient and unhurried, not rushing past what needs attention to reach the next thing. I take all the time this requires. I am here with you in this. Your heart needs healing. I know that. I have known it longer than you have known it yourself. There are wounds in the human heart that form before the person who carries them has the capacity to understand what happened. Injuries that shape the interior landscape of a life before the life has the language or the maturity to name what it is navigating. Some of what you carry began long before you were old enough to protect yourself from it. It arrived in the form of someone else's failure or cruelty or indifference, or their own unhealed woundedness that they passed down to you the way a sickness passes from one body to another, not because you were weak, not because you lacked something, but simply because you were close enough to be affected, and the one who should have protected you did not or could not. That is not the whole story of your wounds. Some of what you carry arrived later, in choices made by people who were old enough to know better, in betrayals that came from within relationships that had built up trust over time, which made the breaking of that trust all the more devastating. Some of what you carry was given to you by systems that were supposed to function fairly and did not. Some of it arrived through the ordinary griefs of being alive, through loss and disappointment and the gap between what was hoped for and what actually came, the particular ache of unmet expectation and deferred longing. And all of it, regardless of how it arrived, regardless of whether there was a clear perpetrator or simply a set of painful circumstances, all of it has left a mark on the interior of you. The wound does not care about its origin story. It simply is what it is, a place of tenderness in you that has not yet received the healing it needs. I am the doctor of the broken heart. That is not a metaphor I use casually. It is the truest description of what I do, of what I have always done. of what I am doing right now in this very moment as your heart opens, even a little, to the possibility that healing is real and available, and specifically meant for you. Every wound you carry is known to me in its full complexity, in the way it formed and the way it has shaped you, and the way it interacts with everything else you carry. I am not approaching your healing with a generic treatment. I am coming to you with the precision of someone who has studied your particular wound, who understands its specific depth and its particular quality of pain, and who knows exactly what it needs in order to genuinely close rather than simply be managed. There is a particular kind of courage required to allow healing rather than simply management. The managed wound is at least predictable. You know its contours. You know what triggers it and what soothes it and how to organize your life to minimize its interference. The managed wound has become, in a strange way, familiar, even comfortable in the way that long-held limitations become comfortable, because at least you know what you are dealing with. The idea of genuine healing, of the wound actually changing, of the interior landscape actually shifting, carries its own uncertainty. What will you be without the wound that has shaped so much of how you navigate the world? Who will you be? How will you relate? The questions are real, and the hesitation they create is understandable. But the person you will be when the healing is more complete is not a stranger. It is the version of you that has always existed underneath the protective arrangements that the wound required. The real you, the one before the layering of self-protection and the learned smallness and the careful management, is not gone. It has been waiting. And the invitation of healing is not the creation of something unfamiliar. It is the uncovering of something that has always been there, waiting to be given back to you. That person is trustworthy. That person is someone I have known and loved since before the wounds arrived. And meeting that person again through the healing process will feel less like becoming someone new and more like coming home. Let me tell you what I saw from the beginning. Long before you understood what was happening to you, long before you had language for the grief that was taking root in your heart, my eyes were upon you. Not as a passive observer watching from a comfortable distance with nothing at stake. Not as someone who saw and felt helpless, or saw and chose not to intervene, or saw and made a calculation that your pain was acceptable collateral in some larger arrangement. My presence surrounded you with a love so fierce that it ached, in the same way that a parent watching their child suffer aches, unable to take the suffering entirely away, but refusing to look away, refusing to leave, staying close and holding what cannot be removed, and whispering into the pain that the pain is not the end. Every moment of your wound is held in my memory with perfect clarity. The specific texture of each one, the exact weight of it, the precise way it altered your understanding of yourself and your understanding of what love looks and feels like, what can be expected of it, what its limits are. I remember the moment it happened. I remember what you were thinking when it happened, the confusion that preceded the understanding of what you had just experienced, the reorientation your whole interior world had to undergo to accommodate this new and unwelcome reality. I remember what you did with the pain in the hours and days that followed, how you absorbed it, where you put it, what you told yourself in order to keep going. None of it is vague to me. None of it is ancient history that I have only a general awareness of. Every detail of your suffering is as present to me as if it were happening in this moment, because love does not let important things fade into abstraction. Love keeps precise and attentive records. And the record of your pain is written on my heart in a way that means every healing touch I bring to you is informed by complete knowledge of what you went through, not partial knowledge, not the knowledge of someone who heard about it secondhand, the full, unabridged, nothing missing knowledge of the one who was there for every moment of it. I walked beside you through it all. I did not abandon you to the wound. I could not. That is not in my nature. When the person who should have stayed walked away, I stayed. When the relationship that was supposed to be safe turned out to be the source of danger, I stood between you and the worst of it in ways you were not always aware of, bearing what I could bear in order to reduce what was placed on you. Though I know you did not always experience the suffering as reduced, and I know there were moments when you wondered where I was and whether I had gone too. The wondering is understandable. The pain was real. And the answer to the wondering is this: I was there. I am here. I will always be here. Not as a promise that nothing difficult will ever come, but as the one who is present in the difficulty in a way that nothing, not even the most severe wound, can sever. Betrayal can be healed. This is one of the most important things I will say to you, and I want to say it in a way that you can actually receive rather than simply hear. Betrayal is one of the most disorienting of all human wounds because it comes from within relationship. It requires trust in order to inflict its particular kind of damage. You cannot be betrayed by someone you never trusted, which means the betrayal you experienced is, in a terrible paradox, a measure of how much you gave, the trust you extended, the vulnerability you allowed, the access to your heart that you granted to this person. All of that speaks well of you. It shows that you are capable of genuine openness, of real connection, of the kind of love that takes risks. The problem was not that you loved and trusted. The problem was that the person in whom you placed that trust was not able to be what they needed to be for you in that moment. That failure belongs to them. I want to be very clear about that. The betrayal is not evidence of a flaw in you that made you easy to betray. It is not a sign that you misread the situation so badly that you should never trust your own judgment about people again. It is evidence of human limitation and human failure, which is something that every person in your life carries within them, because every person is in some way in process, in some way still becoming, in some way capable of failing to be what they should be in a specific moment or over a specific season. The betrayal does not define you. It defines a choice that someone else made, in their limitation, at your expense. But I know that knowing this intellectually and feeling it are two completely different experiences. The mind can accept the truth of what I just said long before the heart does. The heart heals on a different schedule than the mind, a slower one that cannot be rushed by understanding alone. Understanding is the first movement toward healing, but it is only the first. What the heart needs in order to genuinely heal from betrayal is something more than correct information. It needs to be loved well by someone trustworthy over time. It needs to encounter a love that is not going to repeat what the betrayal did. A love that proves by its consistency and its patience and its staying that not everything that looks like love is going to end in devastation. That is what I am offering you. Not a quick resolution that wraps the wound neatly and moves on, but a love that stays beside the wound and tends it day after day, season after season, with a consistency and a patience that has never once wavered and never will. The long experience of being loved faithfully by me, of bringing your wound to me again and again, and finding that I receive it every time without judgment or impatience or the suggestion that you should be over it by now. That experience is itself the healing. It is the trust being rebuilt, not in a person who might fail again, but in the one whose love is the definition of trustworthy. Trust, once broken, does not simply reassemble itself on demand. I know this. I am not asking you to simply decide to trust again as though the decision were the whole story and the doing of it were then straightforward. What I am asking is something smaller and more manageable than that. I am asking you to practice trusting me with the wound itself, to bring the specific injury to me rather than guarding it on your own, to let me see all of it, the parts you are ashamed of, as well as the parts that are clearly not your fault, the way the wound made you behave, and the ways it still influences you today. Bringing me the wound is not the same as resolving it, but it is the beginning of the path toward resolution, and the path is one you do not have to walk alone. There is something about betrayal that likes to masquerade as revelation. When someone you trusted fails you, the wound has a way of presenting itself as a truth you should have known all along, as though the betrayal simply uncovered a reality that was always there, and you were simply too naive to see it. As though the person who hurt you was revealing something fundamental about human nature, or about your judgment, or about the quality of love that is available to you in this world. And the wound says, this is just how things are. People cannot be trusted. Love has a limit. Everyone is ultimately looking out for themselves, and the sooner you fully internalize that lesson, the less you will be hurt by it in the future. That is not a revelation. It is a wound talking. And while the wound is real, and the pain it draws its conclusions from is real, the conclusions themselves are not accurate. They are the distorted reasoning of a heart that has been damaged and is trying, out of self-protection, to never let the damage happen again. The overcorrection to betrayal is a closing, a hardening, a refusal to extend trust again in any form. And I understand why the heart moves in that direction. The logic of it makes a kind of sense in the immediate aftermath of devastation. But if the overcorrection is never revisited, if the closing becomes permanent, something essential is lost. The capacity for genuine relationship requires some degree of openness. The experience of being truly loved requires the willingness to be truly reached, and both of those things require a measure of trust that the healed wound is not able to give, but the healing wound can slowly, carefully begin to offer again, in the right context, at the right pace, under the guidance of wisdom rather than the dictation of fear. I am not asking you to trust blindly. Wisdom about the reality of human limitation is not the same as cynicism about the impossibility of genuine love. There is a middle place, a place that acknowledges that people can fail and that some situations call for caution, while also remaining open to the reality that some loves are trustworthy, that some relationships are safe, that the capacity for genuine loyalty and faithfulness is real, even if it is not universal. The path through the betrayal wound is not back to the unguarded innocence that was wounded before the harm came. It is forward to a wiser, more grounded openness that has learned from what happened without being permanently defined by it. What I build in you through the healing process is exactly that kind of wisdom. Not the suspicious guardedness that has no room for genuine connection, but the discernment that has been informed by experience, that can read situations with more depth and clarity than before the wound, that can recognize the signs of trustworthiness because it has also learned the signs of the opposite. The betrayal, worked all the way through healing and into wisdom, becomes one of the most useful things you have ever been given, even though the giving of it was a violation. That is not me excusing what happened. That is me showing you what I can make of what happened. Abandonment can be transformed. There is a particular grief that belongs to those who were left, a specific shape to the interior wound that forms when someone who was central to your world made the choice to go. And the word choice is important there, because part of what makes abandonment so devastating is that it was not an accident. It was a decision. Someone weighed their options, or surrendered to an impulse, or gradually drifted away over time in a series of small decisions that accumulated into a departure. And on the other side of that process was you, standing in the space where their presence had been, reorganizing everything around a new and unwanted absence. The reorganizing you did was a form of survival. It required strength you may not have fully credited yourself for in the moment. Because continuing when someone central has gone requires you to revise almost everything. Your daily routines that were built around their presence, your future plans that assumed they would be in them, your understanding of yourself as someone who mattered enough to that particular person to be chosen. That last revision, the one about your worth and your choosability, is the hardest and the one that tends to linger longest. Because the leaving can feel like a verdict, even when it is not one. It is not one. I need you to hear that as directly as I can say it. The choice another person made to leave, for whatever reason, in whatever circumstances, does not constitute a ruling on your worth. Their departure was about them, about their capacity or incapacity, their fear or their failure or their own wound that made staying impossible for them in that moment, not about an objective assessment of your value. The jury of one that you allowed to pronounce judgment on your worth when they left was not a legitimate court. The verdict they seemed to render was not binding, but I understand that knowing this and feeling this are not the same experience. The felt sense of abandonment, the visceral knowledge that someone chose to go rather than to stay, tends to leave a particular residue in the body, a bracing, a guarding, a way of holding yourself in relationship that says, I will not let anyone close enough to do this again. I will keep enough distance that if they leave, It will not hollow me out the way the last leaving did. And that self-protective posture makes complete sense, given what you have lived through. It was born from wisdom, or what felt like wisdom in the wake of the pain. But over time, it becomes its own kind of wound, because the same distance that protects you from being hurt, again, also protects you from being fully loved, fully known, fully held. The transformation I am speaking of for abandonment is not a simple thing. It is not a matter of telling yourself the right thoughts until the fear of being left again disappears. It is the slower, more profound work of learning, through repeated experience, that some loves do not leave. And the primary evidence of that truth is me. My commitment to you has outlasted every human departure. Every time someone left your life, I was there in the leaving, not rejoicing in it, not engineering it, but present in its aftermath, in the raw space of the loss, refusing to add my own departure to the devastation of theirs. Every morning you have woken up and I have been there. Every night when the loss felt freshest and the absence of the one who left was most present, I was there. In every season of trying to rebuild, and in every season of wondering if rebuilding was even possible, my hand has been on your shoulder. My love has been at the exact frequency your heart needed to hear, even when you could not quite tune into it. The practice of abandonment healing is the slow discovery of this constancy. It is the accumulation of evidence that tells your heart a different story than the one the leaving told. And that evidence is building quietly every day that you bring your heart back to me and find me exactly where I have always been. The transformation does not erase the scar of what you lost. Some losses leave a permanent imprint, and the person or the relationship or the version of your future that left with the one who abandoned you may not be fully restored in this life, but the meaning of the loss can be transformed. The story that the loss tells about your worth and your future and your capacity for love can be revised, not by pretending it did not happen, but by allowing me to write a deeper narrative over it, one that acknowledges the reality of the wound while insisting that the wound is not the whole story, that something is being built in and through and despite what was lost. Rejection does not have the last word. Sit with that for a moment. Really sit with it. Because rejection is one of the most tenacious lies. It whispers its verdict in a voice that sounds authoritative, that sounds final, that sounds like it comes from someone who has the right to pronounce such things, but it does not. The rejection you experienced, whether it came from a person who chose someone else over you, from a community that closed its doors to you, from a family that was supposed to embrace you and found reasons not to, from a world that did not make room for the particular person you are, none of those rejections have the authority to define you. None of them constitute the truth about who you are or what you are worth or what kind of future is available to you. The wound of rejection strikes at something uniquely vulnerable in the human heart. The longing to be wanted, to be chosen, to be the one that someone's eyes light up when they see. That longing is not vanity or neediness or weakness. It is the natural expression of how I designed you. You were made for belonging. The desire to be genuinely accepted and genuinely chosen is built into the core of your being because it reflects something about how I created relationship. The rejection that frustrated that desire struck at something deeply real, something that was designed to receive love, and the pain of it is proportional to the depth of the need it frustrated. But here is the truth that rejection has been working to bury. You have already been chosen, before any of the people who would later reject you had the opportunity to form their opinion, before you had done anything to earn approval or to deserve dismissal. I chose you. I called you by name. I gave you a specific and irreplaceable place in the story I am writing through all of history. And the choosing was not provisional. It was not on the condition that you perform well enough or remain consistent enough or manage to stay within certain acceptable boundaries of behavior or appearance or personality. It was a full and unconditional choosing, made with complete knowledge of everything you would ever be, everything you would ever struggle with, every version of yourself you would ever present to the world, and every version you would carefully keep hidden. That choosing is the deepest fact about you, not the rejection that tried to negate it, not the moments when you did not feel chosen, when the evidence in your immediate environment seemed to point toward your exclusion rather than your belonging. Underneath all of that, underneath the rejection and the hurt and the long accommodation to the felt sense of not being wanted, the original choosing stands firm. It has never been revoked. It has never wavered. And it is, right now, being actively reinforced by every word of this message, by every moment of my pursuit of you, by the very fact that you are here receiving these words and finding something in them that resonates with the true part of you, the part that is always known, even through all the rejection, that there is more to your story than what the rejection has said. And here is something I want you to hold alongside the reality of my choosing. The people who rejected you were not the final arbiters of your worth. They were limited people, seeing through their own filters, shaped by their own wounds and preferences and blind spots, making assessments based on incomplete information, and those assessments were never authoritative. The community that turned you away was looking for something specific and could not see past their own narrow definition. The person who chose someone else was making a decision from their own needs and inclinations, not from a complete knowledge of your value. The family member who withheld acceptance was operating out of their own history of being withheld from, passing on a deficit they themselves carried rather than evaluating you with any clarity. None of these people had access to what I have access to when I look at you. They saw a surface, a presentation, a set of circumstances. They made their determination based on a partial picture, but I see all the way through to the center of you, to the place that was made in my image, to the quality of soul that exists in you independently of how you have been shaped by circumstances, to the capacity for love and courage and depth that is in you even when the wounds have obscured it. And what I see, looking all the way in, is someone entirely worth choosing, not despite the wounds, not despite the history. Looking at all of it, including all of it in my evaluation, and still saying with complete conviction, this one is worth everything. Bring your pain into my presence, all of it. Not just the pain that seems spiritual enough to bring, not just the grief that you think I will approve of, not just the wounds that are clearly not your fault and therefore feel safe to present. Bring the complicated pain too, the anger that makes you uncomfortable with yourself, the resentment that you are not sure is justified, the bitterness that has grown around the edges of old wounds because no healing ever came and something had to fill the space. Bring the grief that is calcified into something harder, the hope that is learned to stay small so it cannot be crushed again, the love that has nowhere to go because the person it was for is no longer there to receive it. Bring the shame too, the particular wound of feeling that if people could see all of you, truly all of you, the unmanaged and unperforming self underneath all the careful arrangements, they would withdraw the warmth they currently extend. Bring the fear of being known fully, which is paradoxically accompanied by the desperate longing to be known fully, the tension of wanting to be seen in your actual self, while being terrified of what that visibility might cost you. Bring the confusion of not even being sure anymore which parts of you are authentically you, and which parts are adaptations to wounds, strategies developed over time to navigate a world that felt unsafe, a version of yourself that was built for survival rather than flourishing. When you bring all of that to me, something happens. It is not always dramatic. It rarely announces itself with fanfare, but it is real, and it is happening. Think of what happens when rain falls on ground that has been dry for a long season. The first drops do not seem to do much. The surface is hard, compacted by the long absence of water, and the initial drops tend to run along the top, seeking the lowest points, looking for a way in, rather than immediately soaking through. But if the rain continues, if it is gentle and persistent, rather than sudden and violent, the surface gradually softens. The hard-packed earth begins to yield. The cracks that drought created, which looked like damage, turn out to be the very channels through which water will enter and reach the roots. Your wounds are like that. The cracks in you, the places where the hardness of repeated pain has broken the surface, are not only evidence of what you have suffered, they are also the pathways through which healing can enter, if healing is allowed to be gentle and persistent. rather than demand it to be immediate and complete. My love does not force its way in, but it does not give up either. It falls on the hard surface of your guardedness with patient consistency, finding the cracks, seeping in through the broken places, reaching the roots that have been waiting longer than they knew for exactly this. The transformation I do with your pain when you bring it to me is not erasure. I do not simply remove the pain and replace it with something easier, as though the wound never happened and all the history it created simply ceased to be. What I do is more complex and ultimately more beautiful than that. I take the raw material of your suffering, the specific texture of what you went through, the particular weight and shape of your grief, and I work it the way someone who deeply understands a material works with something precious, carefully, attentively, with full awareness of what it has cost and of what it is capable of becoming. The pain you have carried is not wasted in my hands. It is worked, and the working of it, over time, produces something that could not have been produced any other way. Let me tell you something about how water works in the natural world, because I designed it to show you something about how love works in the interior world. When water encounters a stone that has been dry for years, sealed up, impermeable, the water does not force its way in. It gathers in the hollows. It finds the microscopic crevices. It works slowly, patiently, over time, into the structure of the stone. And what the water does in those hidden places, in the slow and unseen work of seeping through what seemed impenetrable, is gradually loosen what was rigid, not breaking the stone, changing it. The stone that has received the water is different from the stone that resisted it. The water that reaches the interior does not destroy the stone's integrity. It makes the stone capable of supporting life. That is what my love does in you when you bring your pain to me and hold it in my presence long enough for the love to do its work. Not breaking you, not flooding you with more than you can manage, but seeping slowly into the sealed places, the defended places, the places that have been closed so long they have forgotten what it feels like to be reached. And in those places, as my love finds its way through the crevices of your guardedness, something loosens. Something that was rigid begins to yield. Something that has been impermeable to grace begins to absorb it. And the living that grows from that process is a different quality of living, rooted not in the absence of pain, but in the presence of love that has reached all the way through the pain. Your past scars will be beautiful in my hands. A scar is the body's record of survival. It is the healed evidence of a wound that once was open and now is closed. And scars, when they have had the chance to properly heal, are often stronger than the original tissue. The place that was wounded and healed is not weakened by the history of the wound. It is, in many cases, reinforced by it. This is true in the body, and it is true in the soul. The places in you that have been most deeply wounded, the places where betrayal or abandonment or rejection did their most thorough work, those are the places that, once healed, carry the most remarkable testimony. Not testimony in the sense of having a neat story with a clean resolution and a comfortable ending. Testimony in the sense of a truth that has been tested, in the sense of saying, I know what this kind of pain is. I have lived inside it. I know what it is to be in the drought and not know when the rain will come. And I can tell you that rain does come, because it came from me, and the roots that I thought had died in the waiting were not dead. They were only waiting, and when the water reached them, there was life there that the drought could not extinguish. That kind of testimony has a weight and a credibility that no academic understanding of suffering can replicate. The person who has genuinely walked through what you have walked through, and who has allowed the healing to do its full work, becomes someone from whom others can receive truth in a way they cannot receive it from people who have only theorized about pain. The scars you are ashamed of, the evidence of the depths you have navigated, are not liabilities. They are, in the longer story of your life, the very credentials of your compassion. They will be the reasons someone else can trust what you say when they are in the middle of their wound, because you will not speak from theory. You will speak from the scar. The past that wounded you is being woven into something. This is the work of my hands in your history. Not that I designed the wound for you, not that the pain was a necessary punishment or a calculated test, but that I am, in the very real and active and ongoing work of redemption, taking what was done in darkness and working it toward light. The beautiful thing that will emerge from your healing is not a version of you that has forgotten what happened. It is a version of you that carries the wisdom of what happened and has been transformed by it, made deeper and more tender and more genuinely helpful to others because of it, rather than in spite of it. Healing is not a luxury. It is your right as my child. I need to speak to something that has been operating in you, a belief you may not have examined directly, but that has been quietly shaping your relationship to your own pain. The belief that healing is something that comes after you have done enough work, proven sufficient faith, demonstrated the right level of spiritual maturity. The belief that needing healing is in some way a spiritual inadequacy, a sign that you are not far enough along on your journey. The belief that other people's wounds are more legitimate than yours, more deserving of attention, more worthy of the space and time that healing requires. None of these beliefs are true, and all of them have been keeping you from receiving what I have been trying to give you. Healing is not a reward. It is not given to the people who have suffered the right amount or in the right way, or who have responded to their suffering with the right spiritual posture. It is not withheld from the people who are angry or confused or who have made mistakes in the wake of their pain. It is not earned. It is given. It is given because you are mine, because you are my child, because the love I have for you does not require you to present yourself in a particular condition before I am willing to treat you. A good doctor does not demand that the patient first prove they deserve treatment. The patient comes with the wound, and the doctor brings the healing. That is the entire arrangement, and that is what is available to you right now. The voice that tells you your need is too much, that you should be stronger than this by now, that the ongoing tenderness of your heart is an embarrassment rather than a legitimate response to real suffering. That voice does not come from me. It comes from the accumulated weight of a world that is often impatient with slow healing and uncomfortable with expressed pain. It may come from people in your past who communicated, directly or indirectly, that your emotions were an inconvenience or a liability. It may come from a version of faith that confused strength with suppression, that treated the outward appearance of being okay as more important than the inner reality of needing care. But it does not come from me. So I am inviting you, directly and without qualification, to stop deferring your healing. Stop treating your interior wound as something to be addressed later, when things are more settled, when you have more time, when the pressing demands of life have quieted enough to create space for this. That space will not create itself, and the longer the healing is deferred, the more thoroughly the wound shapes everything else, the more completely the unhealed pain seeps into your relationships and your decisions and your capacity for joy. The deferral has costs, real ones, and the healing that is available to you right now, in this present moment of drawing near to me, is too important to keep putting off. Come to me with this. Come with everything. Let me be what I have always been, the place where broken things are brought and the healing begins. Interior healing begins now, not as a declaration of completion, not as a proclamation that everything is instantly resolved, but as a statement about a process that is actively underway. The beginning of a thing is real even when the middle is still ahead and the end is not yet visible. And what I am telling you is that the beginning is happening in you right now, in this moment, as you receive these words and let them reach the places in you that have been waiting. There is something that happens in the interior when genuine healing begins that is different from the management you have been doing. Management keeps the wound contained. It prevents it from interfering too visibly with the outer presentation of your life. It maintains the appearance of functioning, but it does not change the wound. Healing changes the wound. And the change begins at the point where the wound is acknowledged rather than managed, where it is brought into the light of honest attention rather than kept in the carefully organized darkness of the place where you put things you cannot deal with right now. What does it mean for interior healing to begin in you today? It means something is shifting in the orientation of your heart. A turning, small but real, from the management of pain toward the receiving of love in the place of pain. It means the wall that has kept me at a certain distance from the wounded place is developing an opening, not a breach that leaves you exposed and frightened, but an intentional opening, chosen by you, through which the healing that I carry can enter. It means the part of you that has been telling you that you do not deserve this kind of attention is losing some of its authority as you listen to the deeper truth of what I am saying to you today. The interior healing that begins now will continue beyond today. That is important for you to understand, because the tendency when something begins is to look for evidence of completion too quickly, to measure the progress by looking for the absence of the wound, rather than by acknowledging the presence of the healing work. Healing is not the absence of the wound. It is the presence of love in the wound, working, changing, transforming. And that presence is real, even when the wound is still tender. The tenderness and the healing are not opposites. They can coexist. In fact, they must coexist in the beginning stages of the process, because the wound does not stop being a wound the moment healing begins. It stops being a wound when the healing has done its full work, which takes the time it takes. So do not measure your healing by the absence of the pain. Measure it by the increasing capacity to let me into the pain. Measure it by the gradual reduction of the shame that surrounds the wound. Measure it by the slowly growing ability to speak about what you went through without the speaking costing you everything. Measure it by the occasional moment of genuine peace that visits you in the middle of a season that has not yet been fully resolved. The peace that does not come from the circumstances improving, but from the presence of the one who is with you in the circumstances. That peace is evidence of the healing. That peace is my love reaching the depth of the wound, and it will come with greater regularity as the process continues. I am here to restore you, not to a previous version of yourself, as though the wounds never happened and the person you were before the pain is the destination. The restoration I am offering is forward, not backward. What I am restoring is not the naivety of before the wound, but the wholeness that was always your original design. The fullness of life and love and capacity that exists in you, at the level of your creation. Underneath all the layers of injury and adaptation and self-protection, the wound temporarily covered what you were made to be. The healing is the slow uncovering, and what is being uncovered is more beautiful than what was there before, because it has been through something, and it carries the depth of that passage. Let me be quiet with you for a moment now. Something happens in silence that the flow of words cannot replicate. When the speaking pauses and the listening deepens, when the receiving of language gives way to the slower and more fundamental experience of simply being present with me, the healing has room to work at a level that understanding alone cannot reach. The wounds in you are not only in your mind, they are in your body, in the way you hold tension in your jaw or your shoulders, or the space between your eyes, in the way certain sounds or smells or tones of voice carry the fingerprint of old pain. The healing that I bring reaches all the way down into those places, but it requires a quality of stillness that is hard to come by in the activity of processing words. So just breathe for a moment. Let the weight you have been carrying settle down from your shoulders, not because the wound has been resolved, but because you are in the presence of the one who is resolving it. And you do not need to manage the healing process while I am doing it. You do not need to understand every step. You do not need to monitor your own progress. You do not need to verify whether what is happening is real. The verification will come in time, in the subtle changes that accumulate, in the gradual shift of how it feels to carry what you carry, in the day you notice that a particular piece of the wound has lightened without your having noticed exactly when the lightening happened. The quiet we share right now is not empty. It is full of my presence, which is full of my love, which is full of the healing that love brings when it is allowed to work in its own time and in its own way. In this stillness, in this unhurried space that belongs to the two of us, something in you is being gently rearranged, not violently, not in a way that feels disruptive or frightening, but with the quiet intentionality of someone who knows exactly what they are doing, who sees every layer of the wound and is addressing them in the right order, and who is not rushing because the work deserves to be done thoroughly and completely. Stay here for just a moment longer. Let this land. Let the words that have come before create the space they were designed to create. And in that space, let me speak one more time to the wound. You are not alone in your pain. This is perhaps the most practical thing I can say to you, because the experience of isolation inside suffering is one of the most damaging secondary wounds that pain creates. You can be in a room full of people and be completely alone in your wound. You can have relationships all around you and still carry your deepest pain in a private space that no one else has access to, not because you are incapable of sharing, but because the wound has convinced you that sharing would be too much, would be received wrong, would result in a response that costs more than the silence does. So you have learned to be alone in it, to manage it privately, to show up for the outer world with enough of yourself held together that the wound does not show too clearly, while the interior work of simply bearing the weight continues on without acknowledgement, without witness, without anyone knowing how much the carrying actually costs you day by day. That private carrying has kept the wound yours in a way that has sometimes felt necessary, but has also kept you isolated from the very thing that would help. Because wounds heal better in the presence of love than they do in isolation. This is not a spiritual platitude. It is a simple truth about how the human interior was designed. You were not made to heal alone. You were made to heal in relationship, in the presence of love that sees the wound and does not withdraw, that acknowledges the pain and does not minimize it, that stays present through the full arc of the healing rather than looking for the moment when things seem better and using that as permission to move on. I am that love, and I am providing exactly that presence right now, in this moment, for exactly this wound. My eyes are upon you in your pain, not averted, not looking away out of discomfort or impatience. Upon you fully, with a gaze that sees everything you are carrying and does not flinch. The full weight of what you have been through is visible to me, and I am not overwhelmed by it. I am not looking for a way to deliver a quick fix and move on. I am here for the whole arc of your healing, for every part of it, for the parts that are progressing and the parts that are stuck, for the moments of breakthrough and the longer stretches of slow and undramatic process where not much seems to be happening, but the work continues underneath the surface. Let me carry this weight with you, not as a metaphor, as a real and practical sharing of the load. When you pray, when you speak these things to me, when you bring the wound into the light of my presence rather than guarding it alone in the dark, something transfers, not all at once, but the weight shifts because it is no longer only on your shoulders. It is shared. And shared weight is different in a way that anyone who has ever been helped to carry something heavy can attest to. The load does not necessarily become smaller, but the experience of bearing it changes profoundly when you are not the only one bearing it. Your tears are valid, every single one of them. The tradition I gave to my people has always made room for mourning. The deepest writings I inspired do not skip past grief into quick resolution. They sit in it. They express it in all its rawness. They give language to the full range of what it is to be a human being in pain, including the anger and the confusion and the feeling of being abandoned and the demand to understand why, and the long ordinary work of continuing to live when living is hard. The permission to grieve is not a concession to weakness. It is the acknowledgement of something true. What you have lost, or what was taken from you, or what never came that you hoped for. That loss is real. It deserves to be genuinely mourned. The tears you have shed have been true expressions of something that mattered to you, of love and hope and trust that were invested and not returned the way they were offered. They have not been wasted. They have been witnessed. Every tear has been received by me as the most honest form of prayer, the one that requires no vocabulary, no theology, no performance of the right spiritual affect, just the pure honesty of the heart that is hurting. The grief you carry about what was lost, or what was done to you, or what you hoped for and did not receive, deserves a space that is large enough for its actual size. One of the things that has complicated your healing is that the people around you and the culture around them do not always know how to hold space for grief that does not resolve quickly. There is pressure, sometimes spoken and sometimes unspoken, to be processing better, moving faster, arriving somewhere more manageable. The grief that goes on longer than expected makes other people uncomfortable, and their discomfort tends to communicate itself to the grieving person. as a signal that the ongoing grief is a problem, a failure, evidence of being stuck, rather than evidence of the genuine depth of what was lost. But I do not have that discomfort. The grief that goes on for a long time, the mourning that has not been able to complete itself because it was never fully witnessed, or because new layers kept being added before the old ones healed. The tears that have accumulated over months and years into something that feels like it might be bottomless. All of that has a home in my presence. There is no duration of grief that exhausts my patience. There is no depth of mourning that makes me look for the exit. The space I hold for your grieving is exactly as large as your grief is, and it will continue to be so for as long as the grieving needs to continue. But alongside the validation of your grief, I want to speak of what is coming on the other side of it. Not to rush you there, not to skip past the mourning before it has done its complete work, but to give you a horizon, a direction toward which the healing is moving, a sense of what is being grown in the ground of your grief that you will one day discover when you are not expecting it. The dancing is real. I want to be specific about what I mean by that. The image of mourning being transformed into dancing is not an image of grief being replaced by forced cheerfulness, of a spiritual bypass that avoids the full depth of the pain by jumping straight to a performance of joy. The dancing I am pointing toward is the expression of a heart that has actually been through something and has come out the other side of it genuinely freed. Not freed by forgetting, not freed by suppression or by the decision to be positive. Freed by the real and thorough work of healing that has reached all the way down into the wound and done what only love can do at that depth. There are people who have been through everything that you have been through, sometimes worse, and have come to a place of joy that is not fragile, not forced, not dependent on their circumstances remaining favorable. A joy that is grounded in something that pain already did its worst to and found it could not ultimately destroy. That is the joy I am growing in you, in the ground of your grief, in the long waiting, in the slow and often invisible work of healing that has been happening underneath everything else. It is not visible yet from where you are standing, but the roots are alive. And what grows from those roots, when the season is right, will be something you did not dare to hope for in the middle of the drought. Open your heart to my healing. Let me show you how. The opening is not a single moment of decision, though it begins with the decision. It is an ongoing practice, a repeated choosing to remain open when everything that is learned to protect you says to close again. It is the willingness to notice when the walls go up and to speak to them, not with condemnation, but with understanding, acknowledging what they were built to protect and gently, incrementally, choosing to stay open just a little longer than the fear wants you to. Think of a flower in the cold season. Its petals are closed, drawn in against the frost, conserving the life within. The closing is not failure. It is appropriate response to conditions that could damage what is most vulnerable. But when the warmth returns, the flower does not need to be forced open. It opens because that is what it was made to do. The warmth and the light create conditions in which opening is natural, is safe, is the expression of the flower's own deepest nature rather than a compromise of its self-protection. I am the warmth. I am creating conditions for your opening not by demanding it, but by being so consistently, reliably present that your heart slowly, in its own time, at its own pace, remembers that opening is what it was made for. Every time you draw near to me and find that I am here, that I receive what you bring without judgment or impatience, that I stay even when what you bring is the parts of yourself you are least proud of, the opening increases. Not dramatically, but measurably. The petals unfold by fractions over time, and one day you look and realize that the flower you are looking at is fully open, and you cannot identify the exact moment it happened because it happened so gradually, so kindly, over so long a period of loving consistency. That is the healing I'm doing in you. You may not feel it dramatically. You may not be able to point to a single moment and say, there, that is when everything changed. But you will look back, and you will see it. The difference between where you were and where you are will be undeniable, and the love that did the work will be recognizable. Let me speak now about something that exists at the very center of healing, something that is often misunderstood and therefore either rushed into prematurely or avoided entirely. The question of forgiveness. Not because forgiveness is a prerequisite that must be achieved before healing can begin, but because the healing and the forgiveness, when both are real, move together, informing and enabling each other in ways that make both of them more complete. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. It is not the same as excusing what was done to you. It is not the same as opening yourself up to the same harm again, or pretending that what happened was less than it was, or rushing toward a restoration of relationship that has not yet earned the conditions it would require. These misunderstandings of forgiveness have caused enormous harm, have asked wounded people to betray their own reality in the name of appearing spiritually advanced, have silenced legitimate grief with a premature declaration that it is over and everyone can move on. Real forgiveness does none of those things. Real forgiveness is the slow releasing of the claim that the wound gives you over the person who inflicted it, not releasing them from accountability to me or from the natural consequences of their actions, but releasing yourself from the ongoing work of carrying the verdict against them in your own heart, which, whatever it does to them, costs you enormously in the carrying. The bitterness that comes from an unforgiven wound is a secondary injury that lives in the person who was wronged, not in the person who did the wrong. It continues to harm the one who was already harmed, and the releasing of it is an act of self-care as much as it is an act of grace toward the one who hurt you. But this releasing cannot be forced. It cannot be demanded on a spiritual timetable. It is the natural outcome of a grief that has been fully allowed, of a wound that has been genuinely tended, of a love that has been received deeply enough that the need to hold on to the verdict relaxes. As the healing progresses, as my love reaches deeper into the wound and the wound begins to close, you will find that the holding of the bitterness becomes less necessary, not because what was done to you was acceptable, but because the wound it created is no longer raw enough to require the protection of the ongoing accusation. The forgiveness I am working toward in you is not an event. It is a process that happens inside the healing process, often without your noticing it directly. One day you realize that you can think about what happened without the same intensity of fire in your chest. Not because the memory has faded or the reality of the wrong has been minimized, but because the wound that the wrong created in you has healed enough that it is no longer as tender to the touch. The forgiveness is the evidence of the healing, and it will come in its time. Not before, not on someone else's schedule, but in the slow and organic way that real interior transformations happen when they are allowed to proceed at their own pace. My love for you is the power behind both the healing and the forgiveness. I am not asking you to manufacture either one from your own reserves, which would be asking for water from a dry well. I am offering you what you need to do both, because both require a supply of love that exceeds what is wounded and depleted in you at this moment. And that supply is available to you in full, as much as you need, for as long as the process takes. The river does not run dry while you are still drinking from it. This is what I need you to know, deeper than anything else I have said. Healing comes from love, not from your effort, not from your will, not from the performance of healing correctly. From love, from being loved in the precise place that was wounded, from having the wound met with tenderness rather than with judgment or dismissal, or the demand to recover on a schedule that suits someone else's comfort. The love I have for you is not general. It does not apply to you as one instance of a category. It is particular to your name, fitted to the exact shape of your wound, calibrated to the specific depth of your need. When I bring healing to you, I am not running a program. I am coming to you, and the coming is the healing. The love itself, genuinely received, is the medicine. You are deeply, specifically, irrevocably loved. Not in the thin way that phrase can be said and quickly forgotten. Not in the way that sounds good, but has never actually reached the place in you that most needed to hear it. In the way that the source of all love loves. With the full weight of a commitment that existed before you were born, and will outlast everything that time and circumstances and human failure have thrown at it. This love is what is healing you. This love is what is reaching into the wound right now. and this love is not going anywhere. Let that truth go where it needs to go in you. Do not rush past it into the next thought. Do not allow the skeptical part of you to immediately respond with a list of reasons why you do not quite believe it, or why it has not felt true in your experience. Just hold it for a moment the way you would hold something fragile and precious that has been handed to you unexpectedly. You are loved, not theoretically, not at a general spiritual level, specifically. Your name, your face, your history, your wound, your particular way of hurting, and your particular way of hoping, all of it is held in a love that is personal and present and entirely unfailing. That love is the ground under your healing, and it will not give way. Rest in that, my child. The striving is over for this moment. The trying to figure it all out, the managing of the wound, the performance of being further along than you actually are, the endless calculation of how much to show and how much to hide, all of that can rest. In this space, with me, you do not need to manage anything. You do not need to present a healed version of yourself. You only need to be here, in this tenderness, in this presence that has been waiting for you to come close enough to feel it fully. Do you know what it looks like when a person is truly resting? Not sleeping, not escaping, not distracting themselves from what is real. Truly resting. There is a quality of deep rest that is different from all of those things, that comes not from the absence of difficulty, but from the presence of a foundation that is reliable enough to stop bracing against. A child at rest in a parent's arms is not at rest because the world outside has become safe or simple. The world outside is exactly as complex and as unpredictable as it was before. The child is at rest because the arms holding them are strong enough and trustworthy enough that the body can stop its vigilance. The muscles that have been held in readiness can release. The breathing that has been shallow can deepen. Not because the thread is gone, but because the holding is secure. That is the rest I'm inviting you into. The rest that comes from allowing the arms that have always been around you to be felt, to be trusted, to become the ground under your feet, rather than just a theological position you hold about my relationship with you. The difference between knowing that I hold you and actually resting in the holding is the difference between a map of a beautiful place and standing in it. The map has its value, but standing in it is different. And that is what I am offering you in this moment, the actual experience, not just the idea of being held. The healing is not ahead of you, like a destination you must still exhaust yourself reaching. It is happening now, in the receiving of love, in the laying down of shame, in the willingness to be exactly where you are, rather than pretending to be somewhere further along. In the moment you stop arguing with your own need and simply allow me to meet it. That is where the healing lives. Not in the achieving of some future state of being whole, but in the present, continuous, moment-by-moment experience of being loved completely in the place that most needs love. There will be days in the process ahead when the healing feels like it is going backwards, when something triggers the wound and it is suddenly fresh again, and the progress you thought you had made seems to have evaporated. Those days are not evidence that the healing is not real. They are evidence that the healing is thorough, that it is working through layers, that the wound has more depth than the surface you have already addressed. On those days, I want you to remember this. The regression is temporary. The direction is forward. The rain does not fall once, and then the drought resumes and nothing changes. The rain continues. The ground continues to soften. The roots continue to receive what they have been thirsting for. The process is not undone by a hard day. It is deepened by a hard day that is brought back to me rather than borne alone. The river is flowing toward you. The rain is falling on the dry ground of the long season you have been through. The cracks are opening just enough to let the water in. Deep in the roots, deeper than the drought reached, deeper than the wound went, the water is arriving at last. And deep in the places where life has been waiting through all of this, quietly, persistently, without losing faith in the rain that was coming, something is beginning to stir. Something is reaching toward the surface. Something is preparing to bloom in you that will surprise you with its beauty. Not the brittle beauty of a life that has never known difficulty. The deep, unhurried, thoroughly rooted beauty that comes from a long winter, from the patient work of love in the dark, from roots that grew deeper precisely because the drought drove them to seek water where it could be found. That kind of beauty, once it finally and fully blooms, does not easily wither. It endures and deepens. What is coming in your life, on the other side of this healing that is now underway, is not a smaller version of what you lost. It is something your wound has been preparing ground for without knowing it. The depth that the pain created in you, the capacity for compassion that suffering has developed, the wisdom about what really matters that loss has refined, the particular quality of gratitude that a person who has known drought has for water. All of those things are the gifts that the hard season is growing in the ground of your life. They are not reasons to be glad for the wound, but they are reasons to know that the wound has not been entirely without fruit, and the fruit will be evident in the season ahead, in ways that will take your breath away. There are people who will cross your path who are in the middle of the same kind of wound you have been carrying. Because you have been through it, because you have sat in the depth of this specific darkness and found your way toward light, you will be able to offer something that no one who has only observed suffering from a distance can offer. You will be able to sit down beside them and not flinch. You will be able to say, without performance or platitude, that you know this terrain and that there is a way through. Your healed wound will be a lamp for someone walking in the dark you once navigated. That is not the reason the wound happened, but it is one of the reasons the healing matters beyond yourself. Stay with me. Let me finish what I have begun. The work that began today in the quiet of your receiving, in the small willingness to let love in through the cracks, will continue in the days ahead. Every time you return to my presence with the wound still tender, you are not starting over. You are continuing. You are adding another layer of water to the dry ground, reaching the roots a little more deeply, allowing the healing to do its patient and thorough work. And every return brings the healing further along than it was before. Trust the process. Trust the love that is driving it. Trust that what I begin in a heart that genuinely opens to me, I am entirely faithful to complete. Amen. If this message reached a tender place in your heart, share it with someone who might be carrying a wound they have never had the words to name. Follow that knowing. Let what touched you flow outward to someone who needs it. Leave a comment below and tell me what part of this spoke most directly to your heart. Your words matter, and this community grows stronger every time someone speaks honestly about where they are in their healing journey. Subscribe to this channel if you have not yet done so that you do not miss the next message. Each one is prepared with care for someone at a specific point in their journey. You are not here by accident, and I am grateful you stayed.